Hello, folks. Eddie Tiongson here with our Elevator podcast crew. It is November, and November is Indigenous Peoples Month. And we are pleased to have a guest speaker, an IVC student and member of the Speech and Debate team, Seadona. And she's going to enlighten us with a persuasive speech regarding missing, murdered Indigenous women. And this is a very important topic, and you'll hear more about it from Seadona herself.
Warning: the following program contains sensitive topics, including sexual assault, human trafficking, and the exploitation of minors. Viewer discretion is advised.
Sharon Bald Eagle was only 12 years old when she was stolen from her home on the Cheyenne River Indian Reservation, taken into a stranger's home, bound and beaten, as is reported on June 10th of 2019 by the West River Eagle. She still hasn't been found to this day. However, the story doesn't end with Sharon Bald Eagle. Sherry Ann Wounded Foot was found having been beaten half to death behind a building in Nebraska. Leslie Ironroad was found locked in a bathroom in North Dakota, having been brutally gang raped on its soiled floor just the night before. These stories are far too common. 84% of Indigenous women experience violence in their lifetime and are 10 times more likely to be victims of homicide, as is reported by Targeted News Service on October 16th of 2019. Today, I'd like to talk to you about why it's so important that we take action for these women. The women whose tragedy we've come to be so familiar with, we've given it a name: M.M.I.W, missing and murdered Indigenous women. First, I'd like to talk about the violent system that has created the M.M.I.W epidemic. Second, I'll go into its causes. And third, I'd like to talk about some possible solutions, both on a national level and on the personal level. By the end, we'll all become familiar with this epidemic. But first, I'd like to deconstruct the problem. The problem is composed of, first, the violence Indigenous women face, and second, the high rate that Indigenous women go missing. The astronomical amount of violence is evident, as the Urban Indian Health Institute, last updated January of 2020, reports that violence against women on reservations is 10 times the national average. In fact, The Guardian reports on November 26th of 2019 that 1.5 million Indigenous women experience violence in their lifetime, the majority of this violence being sexual. Unfortunately, we see these cases of abuse escalate until they end in murder. High Country News reports on October 18th of 2019 that murder is the third leading cause of death among Indigenous women. In addition to this astronomical amount of violence, there's the fact that Indigenous women go missing frequently. Larissa Lonehill's story exemplifies this trend, as the Rapid City Journal reports on January 3rd of 2020 that she went missing in 2016 and still has not been found to this day. While she was once a mother, a sister, a daughter, her individuality was stripped from her when she went missing. She became one face, one name among 5,712 missing Indigenous women reported in 2016 alone, as is seen in CBS News on June 12th of 2019. So where are all these missing Indigenous women going? The brutal truth is that many of them become victims of sex trafficking. On December 17th of 2019, Slate News Services tells the story of a young Navajo girl named Eva. She was found standing alone in a parking lot in Albuquerque, weighing 94 pounds at just 15 years old. She had been stolen from her home and raped more times than she could count, a victim of sex trafficking at an age where the more privileged few of us were simply worrying about our sophomore year homecoming. The sad reality is that Eva is actually one of the lucky ones who was found. Now that stories like Larissa Lonehill's and Eva's have come to light, it's important that we recognize the causes of this problem in order to formulate just solutions. The causes include, first, the harmful mindset that Americans view this epidemic with, and second, the legislative issues that have stunted our country's ability to respond to it. So first, I'd like to talk about the harmful mindset. Now, when people hear that Indigenous women are being abused, their minds have been trained to go to domestic abuse, pinning the blame on Indigenous men. However, The Guardian reports on November 26th of 2019 that 97% of Indigenous victims are abused by non-Indigenous people. In fact, non-Indigenous men are 90% more likely to be the sex trafficker or pimp behind an abduction. So not only is pinning the blame on Indigenous men false, but it actually perpetuates a racist ideal, which has frankly far outlived its welcome in our society. The second cause is the legislative issues that have led to jurisdictional paralysis and powerless tribal law enforcement. The Guardian reports on November 26th of 2019 that when Indigenous women are abused by non-Indigenous men on tribal land, there is an astounding amount of legal inaction. So, is this due to laziness? Neglect? No, in fact, Targeted News Services reports on October 18th of 2019 that Indigenous people have been prohibited from prosecuting non-Indigenous people, even when they commit a crime on tribal land, since 1978. So not only does this render tribal law enforcement effectively powerless, but it actually encourages sex trafficking, as sex traffickers realize they will face basically no punishment. To make matters worse, sex traffickers will attempt to thwart law enforcement by crossing jurisdictional boundaries in a process called jurisdictional paralysis. By crossing jurisdictions, they halt investigations as jurisdictions have a hard time collaborating. In this way, many M.M.I.W cases end up the same way as the women in them, lost and forgotten. Now that we've covered the causes, I'd like to talk about some possible solutions. So first, I'd like to cover the national scale solutions and then move into more personal efforts that can be made. The Herald Republic reported on November 26th in 2019 that Donald Trump signed an executive order to create a White House task force to help solve M.M.I.W cases. While this is a step in the right direction, it can be taken with a grain of salt, as the Trump administration blocked a bill that would have allowed Indigenous people to prosecute non-Indigenous people. However, there is still hope, as the Sierra Club reports on May 4th of 2019 of SAVANW's Act, an act which would stop jurisdictional paralysis by restructuring jurisdictional legislature to promote collaboration, as well as collecting more data on M.M.I.W cases to help them be solved. Fortunately, since 2019, SAVANW's Act has been passed, but there's still more work to be done. So what can we do? As American citizens, we're not often expected to take responsibility for what goes on in reservations. In fact, we're encouraged not to even recognize it. However, the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women invites all of us to get involved by providing a variety of different opportunities. Some as small as following them on social media or signing up for their mailing list, and some as large as volunteer training. Probably the best way to help the Coalition is to simply donate money. While I understand that can be difficult for broke college students, you can still donate money by doing something you probably would have been doing anyways, shopping on Amazon. By shopping on Amazon through Amazon Smiles at smiles.amazon.com, 0.5% of the money you spend is donated to the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women, otherwise known as CSVANW. For more info on this, you can visit their website at csvanw.org. If you like, you can even add a link to the site to your bio on the social media platform of your choice. Mine personally is Instagram, just to allow your friends and family to be part of the solution and to spark a conversation about M.M.I.W awareness. Now that we've covered our solutions, I'd like to once more go over what we talked about today. So we started with the violent structure that has created the M.M.I.W epidemic. Second, we went into its causes. And lastly, we talked about some solutions, both on the national level and the personal. I'd like to remind you that while remembering stories like Larissa Lonehill's or Eva's may not be a pleasant task, it is necessary that we get a little uncomfortable in the pursuit of a just resolution to this decades-long horror story.
So, Seadona, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself? Major, what you do, where you think you're gonna go, all that other stuff, okay? And I may have a follow-up. So tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
All right. Well, this is my second year at IVC. I joined speech my second semester. I honestly don't remember. I joined it a couple semesters ago. It's been such a joy to be able to like have a set reason for me to go out and research like current topics and stuff like that, and find what sort of story I want to both go more into depth on, but also find solutions for, and like allow myself to provide that for other people. I think like as somebody who activism is really important to me. So it's just been really nice to have a structure for that. I am currently a philosophy major. I would like to transfer to, these are like very big competitive schools, so I'm just saying like, I'll take it with a grain of salt, but I would love to transfer to UC Berkeley or UCLA. I've also been applying to UCSB and UCSD because I am a realist. But I would love to major in philosophy and minor in either psychology or political science. It's always just been really important to me to examine the structures of society and how I contribute to that, even just like as one individual, as one citizen, what's my part in playing this this bigger role, especially since we do live in a democracy and yay, we get to vote and everything. But that's me currently.
I don't know if anyone cares, but my doggy just entered the room.
Aww.
Hey, Lily. Hi, puppy. You want to sleep in the sunny spot? Yeah, you do. It's a good girl.
My dog always does that. She comes in my room, there's a spot of sunlight on the ground, and she'll just nap there for hours.
Yeah.
It's the best spot in the house, baby.
Okay, thanks, Seadona, for that response and sharing.
Let's just have her there.
Thank you for that response and sharing your story and all that. And I'm sure you got applications that are coming up soon, right? That you're busy in addressing. So, kudos to you and good luck in that process. And, we wish you all the best in that endeavor. So I'm going to let the others ask their questions.
Well, we kind of already talked about this early on, but I will ask you again in case you wanted to clarify any points. So what was your inspiration when not only writing this, but I guess starting to look into this in the first place?
I think as I sort of touched on in speech, one of my processes in the beginning of a semester is to kind of just like keep some feelers out for what is happening in society and like what topics I might want to talk about. And I remember actually I was working with the head of forensics, Jules French, and she sent me this article, and it was just kind of like a boom moment. Like I read it and there was something in me that just clicked. Like I needed to know more, especially like as soon as you hear that statistic of the 5,712 women, and that's just in 2016, I think that like my heart just went out to all of the stories that I hadn't heard and all of the stories that I don't think many people have heard. And that was kind of the beginning of the speech writing process, was going out and finding these women's stories. And especially Eva's was incredibly touching to me. If you would like to read it, it is on Slate News Service. And it's very long, but it has a lot of statements both from herself and her family and what the experience was. And it just really grounds you in the understanding of like, I have been 15. The process for her started, I think when she was 12, she started getting groomed. And that's why I wanted to say that in the speech of like, when I was 15, my biggest worry was sophomore year homecoming, and recognizing that privilege, and now recognizing that with that privilege, I need to do something about it. I need to say something about it, and I think that was really what drew me to this, was how grounded it felt in not just in the assault and in the progress we can make, but also how grounded it felt in the experience of being a woman, or just growing up in America, because these stories of assault are not only linked to women. But yeah, it was just one of those things where I read it and I felt like I have to talk about this now. I have to do more research, and I felt like I had to talk about it.
Over what you said was, again, it like brings such a deep yet unspoken like topic to make it like more relevant to people. And I think that's how important activism is, trying to bring an issue that is uncomfortable to like share to just everyday people, to say, hey, this is happening and we have to deal with this uncomfortable situation in order to really make a change. So thank you so much. I will now be moving on to Elle to ask you more questions.
Yes, sir. Our next question is just, I mean, it should be fairly obvious, but given how clear and concise your speech was, but what do you want people to ultimately take away from this?
Of course, I would ultimately love for people to take away from this that like you have power here, specifically in the action items that I talk about in my solutions, both through visiting CSVANW.org. And if you like, you can sign up for volunteer training. I think that they have some of that moved online now because in light of the pandemic. But outside of the things that I hope that you do as soon as you finish this podcast or something, which are like, go follow them on social media and stuff like that. Maybe add some of their posts to your stories just to, you know, add that conversation for your friends and family who follow you. But even outside of all of these like specific things, what I really want the message to be is just that there are things for you to do. It does feel like a giant weight sometimes to be, you know, confronting all of the basically disasters that are occurring in our society right now. But there are things that you can break down, you can do the research, and there are these small things that you can return to and really like make not only your voice, but make your action a part of the solution. I think that I kind of touched on this earlier, but I do know that activism fatigue is very real, especially right now when we're all inside, kind of trapped in our apartments, and we're not often like getting our own spirits replenished. But there are things that you can do, and it doesn't have to feel like this massive weight. There is a way to move forward. And knowing that there are all these devastating things out there doesn't mean that we're not necessarily paralyzed by that knowledge. We still have a place we can go.
That is absolutely beautiful, and honestly what I personally need to hear nowadays. That is something I've struggled with, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people listening who feel the same way. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can get to this question. Okay. This is probably going to lead to more of a overall discussion, but brace yourselves. What I wanted to ask is, why should other members of the BIPOC community, including the API community, be invested in indigenous people's rights?
I think that's a really interesting question. I honestly, I feel like when I was writing this, I never really thought of it in that way. I think that specifically this community, we can understand and acknowledge how a lot of this trauma might parallel our communities. I mentioned this earlier. I specifically am a biracial Filipino woman. I am the first generation of my family to live in America, and a lot of the things that I was reading in this parallel stories that my parents and grandparents have told me about immigrant trauma from immigration and being treated like a second-class citizen. So I think that really anybody, any demographic, regardless of race, but since this is specifically a conversation about race, any demographic can relate to that feeling of being treated like a second-class citizen, being treated like your problems are not even on the table for discussion. And I think that what is really beautiful about that is that by being part of a different community, we can also uplift these voices and listen to them. And that's also connects back to why I kind of connected to it, is because a lot of this story parallels the story of the BIPOC. Some of that trauma, for lack of a better word.
Absolutely.
Or that story. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for that, Sedona. You know, the one thing that, you know, as you engage in your future presentations and your activism, right? You know, and I know when we're in our particular space here, the notion of intersectionality is so evident, right? That we can see the connections that impact so many people, so many communities, you know, so many that have been disenfranchised. So it's just, unfortunately, it's just another I guess another item that connects us all together. And you know, and it's making sure that we continue to tell stories, whether they are our stories or other stories, to raise awareness of the different injustices that are out there. You know, is the only way that we can like start making that change, even if it's incremental. You know, reform and change for the better. So, thank you.
Yeah. I guess that kind of wraps up our little interview section. Again, thank you so much for not only sharing your story, but your thoughts with it, and how even if people can't relate, like on one hand, you know, we hope that no matter where you come from nor background, you're able to relate to a certain part of this story. But at the same time, we want another take, is that as I say it, another take from it? Yeah, English is weird.
Takeaway.
Yeah.
Another takeaway is that there's a lot of issues that we need to start. I guess there's a quote I have up there: be brave enough to care. That was a theme, I think, because the easiest thing, that not the easiest thing, but an easy thing people can do is avoid conflict when they're not part of it. But what people don't realize, especially with COVID, you know, we're giving people like solutions, we're giving people ideas, we're giving people the process that, hey, this is information we've gotten. And there's still people who choose to avoid it because maybe it takes too much effort. Maybe there's not enough information. But even so, the idea that there is harm around this world that we can do something about should bring up change, should bring up some people to decide like, hey, I do care about this, or like, I feel like this is an important issue to talk about. And so through your speech and also through this conversation we're having, I hope that more of our audience can feel these things as well. So yeah.
Okay, one last question, just because I know Jules and Bill are gonna like bug me. Okay, you know what I'm gonna ask you. So, Sedona, you know, why do you think, what would you say to those who might be interested in the IVC Speech and Debate team in forensics?
Oh.
Yes, absolutely join it. I know that you think that you can't, or maybe you think you totally can. Maybe you're super confident. I didn't think I could do it. You just saw me give like a 9-minute speech. So, you know, I can do it. I've proven that, at least to myself. But it is, first off, it's just a really good skill to have. You are always going to need public speaking skills. That is going to be present no matter where you're going. Even in like a job interview, it'll be great to have some public speaking skills under your belt. It's also just really good if you are an activist to be aware of like the way that other people's brains work. And this kind of connects back to persuasive specifically, but kind of understanding the rhetoric that is useful to use rather than arguing kind of purely from a place of perhaps anger or emotion. I have found that this has actually helped me a lot in my just like trying to talk to, you know, I live in Orange County and I have some friends who have maybe not been so open to some of the ideals in my speech or in other political aspects of my life. But persuasive has helped me with like mending those interpersonal relationships and starting those conversations. But so that's like your personal stuff. it's also just really fun. It's really fun to be part of a community. It's really fun to be talking to like-minded people. I'm sure that you would love it if you're listening to this and you're interested in what we've spoken about today. I'm sure you would love to be on the team.
And that was Seadona sharing her insight on missing murdered Indigenous women. For more ways to get involved, please visit our links below on resources and social media platforms you can check out in the description below. We'll see you on the next episode.
I'm honestly I'm so sad that I haven't heard about this program until just now, because it sounds really amazing, and I love that you guys are getting together every week or every however often and talking about all of these different issues and challenging yourself to learn about new things and have these conversations and also share them with other people. I just think that's really cool. I love what you guys are doing.
Oh,
Well, I'm glad as a guest you approve of our program, the Elevator Podcast. And if anyone else would like to guest on this show to be highlight their organization or project, then email us. Wait, we don't have a business email. Oh my God, we should get a business email so people can ask.
Basically, it's
Sorry.
it's IVC Elevate AAPI at ivc.edu. That's all you gotta do. It'll come to us, and we'll make sure it happens.
Yeah.